Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host, Flavia Barris, as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media, including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur.
Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we get to talk to Bill Flynn. He has collaborated with Alan Mulally, and he has pitched the Steve Jobs, one and only, accomplished much in his life, has failed often, and learned many useful lessons from 30 years of studying the science of success. He is best described as a pragmatic Simon Sinek, who is unlike Sinek. He is just a great optimist and an operator who's not afraid to get his hands dirty and give pragmatic things to actually do, the actionable tips, the how, not just the what and why. Welcome to the show. We can't wait to hear more about your journey, Bill.
Great. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's great to chat with you because you yourself have had quite the entrepreneurial journey. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So in the early 90s, I started doing startups and I finished in 2015 and I had done 10 by then. I'm either 5 for 7 or 5 for 10, depending on how you count my contribution to things. But either way, the track record's pretty good. And then about 5 years ago, I became a business growth coach. So I became certified in a bunch of things. And now I help my clients to grow in a healthy and thriving way.
So give us an example of, and no client is average. So for all of you clients of Bill's who are listening, I'm not calling any of you average, but Bill, if you were to sort of describe the typical client that you have, that you help, what would that person be? I mean, where would they be in their journey and what are you helping them with?
Yeah. So the leaders that I work with, so it's the head of the company that I work with, either the business owner or CEO or whatever their title is. And they actually have the same 3 qualities that I'm looking for. And mostly I'm able to figure those out before I bring them on. But they need to be humble, they need to be lifelong learners, and they have to be comfortable challenging the status quo on a regular basis. Those are sort of the main criteria I look for. They also have to afford me. I'm not cheap, but that's about it. As long as they got those things, then I'm happy to work with them. I work with all sorts of different shapes and sizes of clients, generally smaller. I think my largest client I've worked with is somewhere in the 70, 80, $100 million range. And I have one that's, when I first started, they were less than $1 million. So I actually tried to talk them out of working with me, but she was insistent and probably would still be with today if COVID hadn't hit. So what I do with them is I teach them a growth framework. That's really, it's taken a lot from Scaling Up, which is a growth framework by this guy named Vern Harnish. Been around for 25 years. It's based upon totally John D. Rockefeller and the things that he did to build Standard Oil. And I sort of add some other things. It's probably 50, 60% that. And then I add some other stuff from other places I've learned. I'm kind of a neuroscience geek, so I add some of that in there as well. But it takes me about 1.5 to 2 years to work with my clients for the first round to get their first plan set. We call it a 1-page plan. It has everything from core things like values, purpose, resources, objectives, all the way through to your vision, your BHAG, your 3HAG, or your 3-year goals, your 1 year, your quarterly, etc. So once I'm done with them, about 1.5, 2 years, they don't really need me anymore. But I've really only shown them sort of the 101 and the 201 of what you could do. And there's still 301, 401, masters and PhD stuff. And so many of my clients stayed with me for many, many years.
And so let's take it a step back. So that's during the time they're with you and even after they're with you. But before they are your client, what is the catalyst that gets these people to say, I need Bill? And how do they find you?
Well, they're generally stuck. They're either stuck because they've been stuck in a sort of a channel of revenue. They've bounced back and forth between 10 and 15 million or 30 and 40 million. They can't seem to break through to the next level, or their lives are stuck. They're so busy that they just can't get away from the business. Their personal life and their family and friends is really sort of gone to the back seat. Those are sort of the 2 main reasons that people work with me, because I'm a growth coach. So if you want to grow your business, then that's when you want to call me.
And do you think you work primarily on the person or on the business, or both equal?
I work with the team. I'm not an executive coach. I don't do one-on-one coaching, at least not on purpose. I work with the entire leadership team. So I definitely work with them. I help them to become more cohesive. So I definitely do that. I don't really work on the business. They do. My job is really to give them the framework to then figure things out for themselves. I can certainly nudge them a little bit, but I try not to. My goal isn't to have them run the business like Bill Flynn would run it. My job is to get them to run something that they love and they would enjoy coming to work every day and doing, and being in whatever role they're in. So that's generally my job.
And when you talked a little bit about that catalyst where a lot of them, it's sort of a lifestyle thing that they're trying to overcome or get through as a team and probably as a company, what are some of the tips that you give to teams to help them sort of rein that in and kind of gain control over their calendars and time?
Yeah, well, I tell them they all have to fire themselves from the day to day. That's the goal, as much as possible, because the job of the leader and the leadership team, to somewhat of a lesser degree, but not much, is not to run the business anymore. Depending on the size of the business, of course, you can only do so much. But your job is to predict the future of the business. And that is a creation process, which involves insight, innovation. And if you're actually doing, you can't engage that part of your brain. So you're not thinking about the future. So that becomes a problem. For a while, it's okay, but that's why a lot of them hit a wall, right? Somewhere along the lines, whether it be 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, whatever the number is, or a billion, they often hit a wall. And it's because they're too sucked into the day-to-day of the business and they're not really getting all the data and information and filling themselves up with sort of the best ideas of the day to run a really healthy and thriving business.
That makes sense. And with all the clients that you've worked with, what are some of the most common causes of falling into this rut? And what are some of the easier solutions to get themselves out of it as far as like actionable steps? Is it taking control of a calendar? Is it a task list that they need to write out and sort of figure out which tasks to delegate, not delegate? And I'm asking this because there's people listening right now who are hearing in what you're saying their own situation. And it may be on a much smaller scale. They're not running a multi-million-dollar company. They might be running a small company, maybe a company of one, but they're thinking, I'm sort of falling into that too. And I'm in it. So I can't really see the big picture because I'm doing all of the daily tasks.
Sure.
What's some of your advice to the listeners who are in that position?
Well, I'm a solopreneur as well. I'm a one-man band. I don't have any assistants. I do everything myself. I do the billing. I made my own website. So what I've learned over 30 years of studying success and why certain people and certain businesses are far more successful than others is that they do a few things really, really well. And so if you're going to be a solopreneur, I know you want to bring revenue in, you got income, et cetera, but that's usually one of the issues that you have in terms of scaling because everything you do is going to be custom and it's just hard. So what I did when I first started is I'm in a couple of different coaching organizations. So I have connections to, 400 or 500 coaches around the world from my two main coaching organizations. So I would talk to them and say, how did you get your business going? What did you do? How did you get your first client? And I took in a lot of information. And to be honest with you, it wasn't really helpful. They didn't give me a lot of advice for someone like me who was starting from scratch. So what I learned is what I took from my startup days. And I said, what do I love to do? And I figured that out and what gives me joy. And then I figured out who is my client and where would they be? So that's sort of that humble learner that challenges the status quo. They actually gather in certain places. They're in Vistage organizations, they're in EO, they're in YPO, they're in the small giants, they're in Renaissance. So you go to those places and I just offered my time. I said, look, here's what I do. Hopefully they thought I was credible and they would invite me to speak or they would take some of my content and deliver it to their folks. So that's sort of how I started. And I don't really do a ton of stuff. Like if someone comes to me and says, I want you to do this for me, I say, no, I don't do that. I can introduce you to someone who can do that for you. But this is what I do. This is what I love to do. This is what gets me up in the morning. This is when I'm doing it, time flies. So that would be my advice is figure out what you love, which is basically figuring out when you're doing it, time is irrelevant. It just flies by. You're sort of in flow, if you will. And hopefully that's something you make a lot of money at. So that would be my advice.
And I love that you said that you often tell people, and no, I don't do that. I can connect you with someone who does, but I don't do that because I find a lot of entrepreneurs have the sort of opposite approach and someone will come up to them and say, I want to give you money for you to do X, Y, and Z. And the entrepreneur will think, I'm going to figure out how to do X, Y, and Z because here's a paying client. Why would I turn away, potential work? But I love that you keep your boundary and you really keep yourself focused on what you do without spreading yourself too thin or saying yes to things that really aren't things you want in your wheelhouse. It's things you probably could do and could do it really well, but you've learned to fence off and keep yourself focused on what you want to do. And what do you do in your free time? Like, how do you use your work time to leverage yourself into that white space that you do leave in your calendar? Because I'm assuming that you sort of follow your own advice in your own personal life too, and have that space to create that lifestyle you want.
Yeah. My lifestyle is great. I don't really work that much in terms of hours. So last year, I think I worked 45 days out of 220 possible days to work. And I had a really good year. COVID hit me pretty hard at the beginning, but things came back. And, this year I'm looking to double my business from last year. So maybe I'll work 60 or 70 days. So I love to read. I'm always, my one phrase strategy is be exceptional. So I want to be exceptional to my clients. I want them to say this is the best money and time they've ever spent. So I'm always filling myself with information, stories, ways to do things better. I read a blog twice a month. It's really a simple, practical, and actionable blog. It's only 1 to 2 minutes to read. Sometimes it's a little longer, but almost always something that you can do. You can download something. Same thing with my book. I wrote a book, and it's a do-it-yourself book. It's called Further Faster, and it's called The Vital Few Steps to Take the Guesswork Out of Growth. And what I've found over 30 years, at least from my perspective, is there are some big knobs that you can turn that have a bigger impact than a lot of the other smaller knobs that we turn. And if you turn those first, you're much more likely to accelerate the velocity of your business. And other than that, I do a lot of stuff. I play hockey. I sing, play the guitar, write songs. I hang out with my kid. She's 21 years old and doesn't live here anymore. So I go visit her. And so I get to do sort of whatever I want to do. I can take a nap in the middle of the day many times. So whatever I want.
Well, it's an audio podcast, but don't worry, I won't make you go get your guitar and sing us one of your original songs. Although part of me is tempted to ask you to do that. But we won't. But I love the title of your book. Where do people find that book? Is it available on Amazon? And give us that title or maybe the book website one more time.
Yeah. So the name of the book is Further Faster, The Vital Few Steps That Take the Guesswork Out of Growth. You can actually download it for free from my site if you want. I'm more about the message than the money, but it's also on Audible and Amazon. It's in paperback and Kindle, and of course, an audio version through Audible. And that's great. I get $4 or $5 every time you do that. So feel free. That's nice. So that's the best place you can get it. You can also just go to my website, and there's a link there to get to all of that. You can download the book from that link. It's just, I think the link says Further Faster, or you can get to Amazon or Audible right from there as well.
That's great. And on Audible, is it you narrating your book?
No, I didn't want to do that. I actually hired an award-winning narrator, which is kind of a fun story because I got him sort of by accident. The company that I worked with, they're called Scribe Media, when I wanted to do an audio version of the book, because I surveyed about 30 or 40 CEOs that I knew and said, how do you consume this kind of content? And most of them said through audio. So I said, all right, I got to do an audiobook, which was another cost for me. But I figured if 90% of those people said yes, it's probably worth the effort. And when when this company Scribe Media was asking me to tell them what kind of narrator I wanted, I said, man, woman, accent, whatever. And I said, I don't really care about those things, but I'd love them to sound like this guy. And I sent them a clip of a guy who actually read some, so I guess they're not children's books. They're sort of young adult books when my daughter was 9, 10, 11, 12. And we loved his voice and his voices and things. And so I said, here's who it is. If you can just sort of match someone with this would be great. And they actually got him. I had to pay a little bit more, but he narrated my book for me. His name is LJ Ganser. He's an actor in plays. He's also done like Mountain Dew commercials and other things. You can see him. You probably see him on TV. And we've actually become friendly. When COVID is gone, we're going to go grab a beer. He lives in New York, so it'll be kind of fun. So I love the way he reads it. He business books are generally boring, and he's an actor. So he actually, when the stories are being told, he acts them out. And it's a little more interesting, I think.
I think that sounds great. Everyone should check out that Audible version of the book, especially now that we have that background story, which is just fabulous. I love can you get someone like this? We really like this voice. So as close as possible to this voice as you can. And, your people come back and say, actually, we have good news. We got the guy. So couldn't get closer than that.
That was wonderful.
And then for your own business, you focus on, helping others grow their business. But for your own business, what is your growth goal coming up in the next 2, 3, 4 years?
$1 million. I want to make $1 million a year without having to hire any employees.
That's a fantastic goal. A nice round number too. Although I think it would have been great too if you said $1,234.63. But I love it. It's always great to have goalposts. Do you find that a lot of entrepreneurs don't often enough set concrete goals that are quantifiable and concrete? Do you find that's a problem?
Well, actually, I think it's a problem in two ways. Sometimes we get too tied to the goal. And I actually think it's more about progress than some achievement in business. If you keep doing the right things really well, hire the right people, make sure you understand what your customers really love and how you're helping through their struggles and make progress in their lives. You treat your people really well. You focus on a few things. You can basically hit just about any goal you want as long, within the size of the market that you're in, either geography or industry or whatever. I don't encourage people to say, oh, my goal is, we have to make $5 million this year. Certainly you can set a target, but if you also set yourself up potentially for failure, and if you don't really know how to do it, and you haven't set up the foundation and the environment and the conditions to do that. So I focus much more on, let's set them up, like I get them a BHAG and we got a 3-year goal. I said, but in the end, we just want to make sure that we're moving forward. And if we keep course correcting and improving, as long as the market can handle it, most of my businesses, I say, when you're successful or when we're successful together, you're actually slowing your growth because you can't hire fast enough or put the processes or physical attributes in place fast enough. That's what you want. You want to be turning away people saying, I'd like to bring you on, but I can't because then I wouldn't give you the highest level of service that I want, that I would ignore on some of my other clients. So you're going to have to wait. We'll put you on a list or whatever. That's the ultimate goal for my clients, for me.
I love it. So you do what you do so that you can get them to that point where they truly are, I guess, at capacity and people still want in and they're having to turn away clients. But when they reach that level, what's next for them? Because I would imagine they need to increase their capacity so that they're no longer turning away those clients, because that would be growth, right?
Yeah. So there's always a balance between people and process, right? So, sales, marketing, all the functions, it's a process. And if you do really well at that, then you got to balance it with people, because if you ignore the people, then you'll burn them out. They'll be unhappy. The clients will be unhappy because they're not getting the service or the time or attention they want. So you definitely have to do that. And I encourage my clients, I give them a roadmap that they can sort of put down that turns out to be a 36-month forecast, which tells them how much revenue by month they'll have, how much profit, cash, how many widgets they will have sold, and how many people they will need at that time. And then we lay out an organizational map of existing. And then in 3 years, what would that map look like? So they know, not from a date perspective, but when you bring on more assets, they're also a liability, meaning you have to pay them. So you want to make sure that you attach those hirings when you can afford them. So we lay that all out. So they have a really good idea of not only about how they're going to do, and we're generally pretty accurate, not because we're good guessers, just because they're controlling their own fate. They're really working through the details of how exactly, what are the big things we need to do in order to get there? Not always a straight line. And then they figure out how many people they need. And often I find that they think they need more people than they actually need, because too often we do not focus our team members' time on the things that they love doing the most. We try to fit them into these boxes that are arbitrary anyway. So I'm a big fan of, you'll never have well-rounded people. We are not well-rounded. We're all very spiky. We're idiosyncratic. But you can have a well-rounded team of idiosyncratic people if you understand the makeup of the team, the key functions of the team, and then the key outputs of the team. You can then start to mix and match things. And when people are doing things they love, at least one day a week, according to some research, they are much more engaged, much more productive, and they're much more efficient as well, because they love what they're doing. They're probably going to make it even a better thing. So we have a lot of, I like to say that tiny errors compound. And that's why most businesses actually go out of business. You only have a 50-50 chance of lasting 5 years in the United States, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics and Small Business Administration. And that's a shame, because many people probably didn't want to go out of business. So that's why I like what I'm doing. It's a very practical way to look at your business, and it gives you steps, concrete steps that you can take to start to build that environment and the conditions for success.
I'd love your input, going back to what you were just talking about with putting employees in the roles where they thrive because they're passionate about what they're doing and they're ultra efficient because, they're just loving their day-to-day work. What do you think about this kind of new philosophy that's out there? I don't know what else to call it, a philosophy, a theory that says, hey, maybe we should have 4-day work weeks, or maybe we should have shorter work days. So maybe the work day would not be 9 to 5. It might be 9 to 3 on a daily basis, but you work 5 days a week. Do you think that the sort of 40-hour week and the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, that's traditionally been what you think of as a full-time job, Is that flawed? Is that something that should be worked on? Is that something that should be reimagined? Or do you think that it's pretty arbitrary and no matter what you set up as a calendar, what really matters is what you're having people do and not the amount of time or the schedule that you're giving them?
Yeah, so I blame all of this on Frederick Winslow Taylor. This is why we're here. In the early 1900s, his way of making an industrial revolution company more efficient was to routinize the work, and then you could figure out how much your output would be based upon what you did. And we don't do that anymore. So yeah, I think it's very flawed. I don't think it matters how many hours you work. What you have to do as a team leader or as a leader of a company is you have to figure out, what are we trying to accomplish? I have my clients lay out what's called a key process flow map or a key function flow map. And it really, you tie those 4, 5, 6 things together that where your money comes from, right? So generally you spend money upfront in marketing and other things, and maybe materials or whatever it is. And then you hand over some leads to sales, and then sales takes those, closes them, hands them over to operation, and they deliver or implement or whatever it is. And then very often you get paid somewhere along the line, either before or after or whatever it is. Those are usually the 4 main things that most businesses do. But we really don't understand the inputs and outputs of each. So if you understand from a team perspective, either the high marketing team, or maybe there's a demand generation team that's a subset of that, you need to figure out all those key functions that drive each of those main functions. And then you just say, look, here's the deal. We want to grow to this size. We plan for this. This is your contribution to it. Here's the standard that we'd like you to set. Here are the metrics and the numbers by month, quarter, whatever. And you should say, I don't care when you do it. And why should it matter? So yeah, I'm not a big fan of 40 hours, 4 days. I think it's a backwards way of looking at things. People are generally responsible. If you hire people who love what you do and they believe in what you believe, man, they're going to do tons of great things for you and for themselves. And you should just trust them. You have to create an environment so they can have autonomy. There was a study done by Cornell a number of years ago where they took 320 some odd companies, and they were in 2 different groups. One, they gave autonomy to the employees, the team members, and the other was more command and control. I think it was a 400% difference in over N number of years for the autonomy group. They were much more productive.
400%. That's no small number. That is amazing. Well, I love everything we've been chatting about. And I also like getting to sort of that philosophical angle too, that we just talked about. It's like, how do we define the work week? How do we define productivity and work in general, right? I mean, everyone who needs to make a living and work at something should really kind of look at what they're doing and see if it does align with their interests and their passions and the things that they would be the best at. Because a lot of people end up in jobs that they just fell into by chance or maybe out of desperation or, first job out of college, here's the only place it'll take me. And then they just kind of stayed there. And maybe it got kind of stagnant and maybe it really wasn't where they were meant to be. What do you think is a way that somebody can break from that kind of pattern and let's call it like a cage, because it is comfortable. Often you're making a good living, you have benefits, you don't want to rattle anything, and you just want to go with the flow and stay in that current pattern, but you're not feeling inspired, you're not feeling fulfilled. And often it's very difficult for people to leap. What's the best way that someone can really work through that themselves and take that brave leap forward?
So according to like Gallup and some other places, the people who love their jobs the most often craft their own job. And there's a real simple exercise to help you to start that crafting process, which is by Marcus Buckingham. He used to be at Gallup and now he works for ADP. And he's written a bunch of books on this kind of stuff. And it's called what I've added to it. It's a love, loathe, long, and lust list. So what you do is you get this piece of paper, which has these 4 buckets in it, right? Maybe you make 4 squares or whatever it is. And as you go through your day and your week and your month, I'd probably recommend you do it for a week or 2 first. Whenever there's something that you're doing that you love doing, meaning time flies, an hour feels like 5 minutes, put that down in the love column. When there's something that's the exact opposite, where you're doing it for 5 minutes, it feels like an hour, you're bored, you're distracted, et cetera, then put that in the loathe column. And if it doesn't fit either of those extremes, then don't put it in there at all. And then also think about stuff that you used to do, maybe if this wasn't your first job or even when you were younger. And we put that in the long bucket, right? That's what I long for. I'd love to be able to do that again. And lust is, what is this something that someone else is doing that I think would be pretty cool and I'd like to do it? And look at that and try to figure out how you can do more of the love, long, and lust stuff and get rid of the loathe stuff. Either just stop doing it, get it off your plate, if that's possible, whatever it is. Because my guess is if you loathe it, you're not very good at it anyway. So it's actually beneficial to the team and to you to try to figure out maybe someone else on the team loves the thing that you loathe, and you can sort of switch stuff. As long as they understand the team dynamic and the team outputs and function, then it really doesn't matter who does what, as long as the team gets its job done. And most work is done by teams in many companies. Obviously, if you're a solopreneur, you're a team of one, but even if you're two, you're a team. So that's what I would recommend. It's actually in my book. I don't do the long and the lust thing. I've added that in the last year or so. But you can actually download a pre-made love and loathe chart and fill it out. And then, I'd recommend go to your boss and say, here's what I got. And if you're in a generally psychologically safe environment, then hopefully your boss will work with you to do it. If you're not, then I don't think you're ever going to get what you want anyway. It's probably time to go trying to find a company that you should go to.
And I love that you said that if you loathe something, you're probably not that great at it, and probably someone else who loves that same task would be better suited to do it than you. I love that. So I've learned so much today. For people that want to get in touch with you or follow you, get your book, what is the best website or other place that they can go to connect?
Sure. So my website is www.catalystgrowthadvisors.com, and everything is on there. You can actually book a meeting with me, my phone number, my email, all the blog posts. I got 130 blog posts I've written over the last 4 years. My book is there. All the exercises to my book, there are 25 exercises that go with the book. So you can sort of read a chapter or two and then go and do the exercise and sort of do it on your sort of a DIY thing, as I mentioned before. So that's the best place, www.catalystgrowthadvisors.com.
Thank you, Bill. It has been so great chatting with you today. We are grateful for your time and for sharing your wisdom, and hope we connect again soon.
Thanks, Stevie.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and if you leave a review on iTunes, I promise I will read every single review. If you know someone who makes a full-time living from part-time work, and maybe this is you, please visit lifestylesolopreneur.com to nominate a guest or to nominate yourself. Because remember this, money doesn't buy happiness. But money in the hands of a happy person, there is no greater tool.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Get Shift Done program. It's a lifestyle-changing online class to help you define your business and lifestyle ambitions, and to set goals in a way you've never experienced before. This class will 10x your daily productivity with methods that will blow your mind. And if you use a coupon code podcast, the class tuition is 99% off. Visit GetShiftDone.com to enroll today.